So, themes in Hitchcock, we are talking about auteurism and the abiding themes in an author's work. You have a list of films where murder is at the center: Psycho, Vertigo, Rear Window, Strangers on a Train. You know which movie I am talking about? Strangers on a Train? Strangers on a Train. You know the movie? Yes. Two strangers meet on a train, and yes, you kill my wife and I kill your father. Okay, that is the deal, because no one will suspect us that way, and both of us will be there for each other for alibi. But then how the plan goes awry. Dial M for Murder, it has been remade several times, first time with Grace Kelly. Blackmail, Rebecca, Spellbound, 39 Steps, all deal with the theme of murder. Moral ambiguity, he was one of the first directors to give this touch, moral ambiguity to his characters. I mean, if you look at the girl's character in The Birds, morally quite ambiguous. She is the one who is chasing the guy. Okay, the guy does not have strong feelings for her, but she is not willing to let go of him, and then she has to be punished for that, right? A woman who transgresses her boundaries, that is the idea. So, birds become a metaphor. I mean, what are those things? A town cannot be just invaded by birds. So, birds is a metaphor. This is how women get punished when they cross certain boundaries.
His mother's feelings towards him.
Exactly. So, that is also there. So, moral ambiguity. Yeah, all relationships are ambiguous. And love and betrayal, of course, Vertigo is a classic example. We have also been talking about voyeurism, several movies including Frenzy, Birds, Psycho, of course, Rear Window and Vertigo. So, preoccupied with eyes and watching several close-up shots of eyes. When Janet Leigh is murdered, you get a close-up shot of her dead eyes looking at you directly. The gaze. Jimmy Stewart gazing at people in Rear Window. Jimmy Stewart gazing at Kim Novak through an opening in the door. Janet Leigh before dying, that close-up shot of her dead eyes. Who played the girl's role in the remade version? There was a remade version, yeah, Anne Hesh. She has a stark resemblance. Now, this is another interesting sequence, Rebecca, and you have the great Laurence Olivier playing Maxine de Winter and Joan Fontaine playing the girl. Look at this particular shot, and then look at this, again a Hitchcock movie, To Catch a Thief, Cary Grant and the great, who? Who is she? Oh, classics are definitely not your strong point. You do recognize Cary Grant, yeah, and you should also recognize Princess Grace of Monaco. This is Grace Kelly, the ultimate fashion icon. So, she was all designed by Christian Dior in this movie, famously designed. I mean, if you look at her her look, her fashion in some of the movies she did with Hitchcock, it is mind blowing. It says that people have done PhD thesis on Grace Kelly and fashion, especially with reference to Hitchcock movies. Hitchcock was impeccably dressed, impeccably dressed. Hitchcock's fascination with certain actors. So, Cary Grant was a favorite, and so was Grace Kelly, and this is notorious.
What was the point about the two shots that you
Quite alike, you know, a couple driving down the road, and quite, you know, the mise en scène is quite similar. Did you see the mise en scène?
There's a scene when she's drunk and she's
Driving, yes, even in Notorious. So, an author would leave his signature mark. You know, you watch a movie and you feel, yeah, only Scorsese could have done. Yes. likewise Hitchcock. So, again they collaborated, Cary Grant and Hitchcock, in North by Northwest. Do watch this movie, it is known, which this duster cropper scene where he is being chased by this down the fields. And where does the climax take place? Mount Rushmore. They must have created an exact replica of that. Also, his fascination for working with James Stewart. Several movies, The Man Who Knew Too Much with Doris Day, another blonde. James Stewart, Grace Kelly, Rear Window. This is interesting. In a room, yeah, again you can perhaps consider the theory. Virginia Woolf, of course, some of you must be familiar with the feminist writer Virginia Woolf. In a room of her own, Virginia Woolf talks about football and fashion, and she says football and sport are important. That is the kind of our society, because these are associated with what? Masculinity. Yeah, so they are important. The worship of fashion, the buying of clothes are trivial. Okay. They are related with some trivial feminine pursuits, but then why football and sport? Why? They are as trivial for a woman, right? Okay. And these values are invariably transferred from life to fiction. Men tell us all the time that fashion is trivial, football is important, and this is many movies, many works of art capture this philosophy, and this is something, this set of values is replicated in Rear Window. Okay. He is a sports photographer. Okay. He breaks his leg while capturing a spectacular shot of a racing car. Okay. And she is into fashion, and throughout the movie he is very dismissive of her. We cannot, our relationship would not work out because we are two very different people. I am a completely outdoorsy, whereas you are a fashionable girl. And this is how the movie ends. He has broken his another leg after this his fight with the villain, and she is looking after him. In order to impress him, she reads a book called Beyond the Himalayas or something like that, but once he sleeps off, she takes up the copy of Harper's Bazaar. So, with Grace Kelly, he has worked in 3 classics: Rear Window, Dial M for Murder, To Catch a Thief. His favorite blonde. It is a MacGuffin. Are you aware of this term in Hitchcock? No. What is a MacGuffin?
It's when you are in pursuit of something which you don't know what it is.
It is trivial. You see, it is a MacGuffin. What are the characters after in Notorious after all? What are they pursuing? You remember that wine cellar scene in Notorious? Yeah, what exactly is that? Beautifully done shot, but what are they looking for?
They don't know what they're looking for.
They don't know what they are looking for. Usually, because it is an espionage thriller, so it must be some kind of a formula, a nuclear formula or some papers or some documents. But Hitchcock says the plot is important. What they are looking for is not. So, there is a MacGuffin. His Hitchcockian term for this unidentified object is MacGuffin. It could be anything, a piece of ring, to catch a thief, a set of jewelry is missing, a MacGuffin, but it gives tremendous scope for all these beautiful people to come together and wear beautiful clothes and romp around in beautiful settings. Okay. What they are looking for is a MacGuffin. So, that is Hitchcockian term, which has come to become a part of film lexicon. And this is another characteristic of an authorial touch, employing the same characters and technical crew as well. So, apart from his actors, we have already talked about, he often collaborated with the maestro, music composer Bernard Herrmann, who was later used by Scorsese. Now, Hitchcockian legacy continues. and we have Anthony Hopkins playing the man himself with Helen Mirren playing his wife. The Girl, which is based on Hitchcock's obsession with the actor, the female actor who played the heroine in The Birds, okay. Tippi Hedren, Melanie Griffith's mother. The legacy continues. De Palma's 1980 movie starring My Address to Kill, starring Michael Caine and Angie Dickinson, is a homage to Psycho to an extent. Dress to Kill. I would also like to draw your attention to another movie which is again about voyeurism. Michael Powell, he was a British filmmaker, Peeping Tom. Director Michael Powell's Peeping Tom. He is a man with the camera, he suffers from severe complexes just like Norman Bates in Psycho, yeah, and he kills unsuspecting women. So, you have to watch the movie for its voyeurism and for its colors, the way Powell uses colors. It was released around the same time as Psycho, but didn't become such a huge blockbuster. This is one of those rare gems which should be watched alongside Psycho. Then De Palma is another homage to Vertigo and Rear Window, Body Double, 1984. Gus Van Sant literally remade Psycho. There are no changes except that one is in black and white, the other in color. And Hesh reprising Janet Leigh's role. This is my all-time favorite movie. Michael Douglas, Gwyneth Paltrow and a very young Viggo Mortensen. Yeah, Perfect Murder, which is a reworking of Dial M for Murder. A jilted husband plotting to murder his rich wife. (1998). I am very sure most of you here are familiar with John Woo's MI2, Mission Impossible, which is a ripoff of Notorious. In what way? What's the plot of MI2? Now, don't tell me that you haven't watched MI2 as well. Azhar, are you familiar with MI2? Yes? What happens? What does he do? What is the basic plot? What does he do to Tandy Newton character? He is in love with her. And what does he do to her? She is a woman with a dubious past, just like Ingrid Bergman in Notorious. What does Cary Grant do to her? He asks her to marry a man who everyone suspects is a Nazi sympathizer, but they do not have enough evidence. Ingrid Bergman's job is to unearth certain secrets, those MacGuffins from that husband's closet. So, when the husband suspects that his wife has been betraying him, he starts killing her by slow poisoning. He gives her regular doses of arsenic in her coffee or cocoa. That is the way, that is the plan to kill her, but so that no one would suspect. If you kill her immediately, everyone would get suspicious. Here, death by slow poisoning. And then Cary Grant at the end realizes his true love for her and comes and rescues her. Spectacular scene. He carries her in his arms and walks down the steps very slowly, and you would feel, aren't these steps ever going to end, because in which household do you have so many steps? Okay, but you count the number. When he goes up, they do not look so insurmountable. Okay, definitely, but when he comes, and that is an illusion that Hitchcock creates, because while he brings her and carries her in his arms at the end and coming down, and with her husband and mother, a very sinister mother-in-law watching the scene, observing the scene, Okay. So, the suspense has to build up, therefore, more number of stairs. People have counted actually. So, definitely more number of stairs while he comes down. So, what does this character do in MI2? Tom Cruise, he plants Tandy Newton in the household of this villain, okay, in order to get his hands on it's a MacGuffin, chimera, right? A chimera is going to start some kind of a disease, a fatal disease in the world. And then what does the villain do? He abducts the heroine at the end, and in order to save the hero and the world from perishing, the heroine injects herself with chimera. Remember that scene? And starts dying slowly. Okay, so that's the plot. So the movie was a smash hit. MI2 of course is a franchise, but then critics didn't fail to notice the pathetic rip-off the movie was. Personally, I do like it. Easy Virtue is a remake version of Hitchcock's Easy Virtue. It's one of the rare comedies which Hitchcock directed. Jessica Biel, Colin Firth, Christine Scott Thomas and Ben Barnes. So, now coming back to the authorial theory. Do you have any comments on Hitchcock so far? Anything you? Exactly. Disturbia was a remake of Rare Window. Can you throw some light on Disturbia?
A guy punches a Spanish teacher or someone, and he was
Louder, louder, so that we can capture you well.
A guy punches his student. He punches his Spanish teacher and is grounded. His house arrested, so he can't move away from his house. So he spies on other neighbors. He falls in love with a neighbor girl, and he watches a dubious guy making making a murder, and he suspects and he keeps on watching him. So the movie goes on.
Okay, so Disturbia. Who directed it? Okay, please do your homework. Disturbia is directed by a fairly well known director. Okay, so do your homework there. So, homage to Hitchcock, that is what we are talking about, it is never ending. So, he has left an indelible impression on so many people. Every once in a while there is a major book on his films, every once in a while there is a movie on his films, and in many of the contemporary films you can see his influences.
One of the themes that runs through his movies is a strong mother figure.
Yeah.
Like in Psycho,
Yeah.
in Notorious.
Notorious,
There is a very strong, and in several other movies.
Even in Rebecca, yeah, the housekeeper is a mother figure. Yeah.
And how she plays, or even like it has an influence on the
words, yes.
main character.
So, those Oedipal complexes, they remain unresolved in many of Hitchcockian movies. So, you see Oedipal trajectory is something that is very common in most Western literature. Yeah. Sinister influence of maternity, that is what Eugene O'Neill calls this element in his immortal play called Desire Under the Elms, sinister influence of maternity. Okay. So, while talking about authorship, so who is an author? The other day we were talking about, it's very, authorism is a problematic concept, right? After all, an actor makes a movie too, he is the one who draws in the audience. MI2, we just talked about it. Okay. All we need is Tom Cruise's presence, and people will throng to the theatres. We have writers, we have composers, of course, and we have the producers. So, who makes a movie? So, Roland Barthes in his essay Death of the Author, which is contained in a volume called Image, Music and Text in 1968. So, Roland Barthes we have often been talking about in this course while doing intertextuality and semiotics, remember. So, Barthes posits that it is the reader who gives a text meaning or a viewer who gives a movie meaning. It all depends on the audience or the reader. The reader or the audience is the interpreter, and then there can never be one definitive reading of a text. So, all of us have our own ways of looking at a text, be it a book or a painting or a film. So, responsibility finally according to Barthes rests with the reader viewer, as they need to engage with the material and become an active participant rather than just remaining passive participant. So, ultimately it is you, my dear reader or audience, who gives meaning to a work of art. I would like to suggest certain readings. So, you have a book called Hitchcock's Centenary Essays, which was published by British Film Institute in 1999. The occasion was 100 years of Hitchcock. Then a feminist reading of Hitchcock is done, apart from Laura Mulvey's essay, Visual Pleasure, The Women Who Knew Too Much, Hitchcock and Feminist Theory by Tania Modleski. And Laura Mulvey's essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, that is a definitive work of criticism. So, I would recommend that you look at Laura Mulvey's essay, which appeared in Screen. You can take down the citation, Screen Journal, it is available online. You just have to Google Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. Very soon you people will start your presentations, key concepts, and then second round would be on theoretical presentation, and do a nice reading of Hitchcock in films. All right then, thank you very much. We meet tomorrow.